to the Forum, your way to keep up with state and community leaders, experts, and local business leaders. This is your chance to hear from and talk to people that affect your life right here in Rim Country. You can express your opinions by calling 474-2427. And remember, the comments and opinions of guests and callers are not necessarily the opinions of KMOG. Welcome to Rim Country Forum.
Good morning. Happy Wednesday to you. Charlie Serafin with you on the Rim Country Forum. It's 7 minutes after 9 o'clock. We want to thank our sponsors, the Power of Fives, the Dana Law Group, Banner Health, Payson Medical Center, Pinnacle Propane, easy for me to say, Realty Executives Arizona Territory, the Owens Law Firm, and Sunshine Cleaning and Restoration. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very informative program for you, and I know that you're going to have some questions or comments as we go along. We have in studio Chief David Staub of the Payson Fire Department and Kevin McCulley, who is the Fuels Manager. And morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Chief Staub. I'm going to put you on the spot, and you once saved my life. Do you remember it? Probably not.
I apologize, I don't.
No.
That's one thing about this job is we tend to have a bigger impact on those we serve than our own memories.
Well, you were actually off duty at the time.
I was?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. You were off duty, but you were wearing your shirt, and you're the second person that I ever met in Payson.
Oh.
2.5 years ago. It was on a February night at an unnamed Mexican restaurant where you were stopping in to get some food, and I was there, and I saw your chief shirt. It was a different shirt, I think, than the one you're wearing. In fact, I know it was. And I engaged you in a conversation about the unification of the 3 fire departments, which was at that time a hot topic. And I told you I was thinking about moving to Payson, and you took about probably close to a half an hour to give me the Chamber of Commerce, this is what's great about Payson speech. So, do you remember?
I love this community.
Yeah,
I really don't, and I'm sorry, but I do that with such regularity.
Yeah. You're always out there.
Unfortunately, you're probably one of about 100 people I've done that with.
Yeah, so you're
always... I love this community. It's a great community.
Yeah, so. That's what you said. Yeah, and you talked about your girls and bringing them down to be in the school system here and all that, so... Thank you.
Well, good. I'm glad you took some advice and you moved here. It's a great community.
It really is a great community. The first guy that I talked to was a landscaper, and he spent a lot of time with me. And then you came in as the fire chief, and you spent a lot of time with me. And then the third guy was a stone mason, and he took probably an hour with me. And I remember calling my wife that night and saying, honey, I've just met 3 people that I think I could be friends with here. And the place where she wanted to live, I said, I don't think I would be friends with anybody there. So anyway, we came to Payson. So thank you.
Well, great,
Chief. Yeah. Where were you born, Chief?
So I was actually born in Phoenix.
Okay, in the Valley.
In the Valley.
Yeah. And how did you get to Payson? What was the route?
Well, so this is my second venture into Payson. When I was really young, my dad was in the Air Force, retired, used his GI Bill to become a air conditioning repair person, and my folks decided to move to Payson to start his business. In early 70s, they operated a AC appliance repair business and was all over Payson. Was a volunteer on the fire department, was a lieutenant on the fire department at the time. And somewhere along the way, he decided to become a professional firefighter, and we moved to Scottsdale, and he spent a career doing that, and I grew up down there, and then I've kind of traveled all over the state. And what actually happened was I was a battalion chief in Casa Grande, running a shift and in charge of EMS and personnel-related issues. And my wife and I really wanted to move up here, and there were some reasons going on that made us really want our kids to have a change from what was going on there. And Pine Strawberry was looking for a fire chief, and so I threw in my hat and wound up getting accepted, took the job, moved up here. And as I lived up here, Marty DeMacy retired from the town of Payson, and I had friends and worked at the town in different positions, and I really thought it was better for my family to move them down here out of Pine. So I threw my hat in that ring and was successful, and I've been here now for 7 years, and I love it. I love Rim Country. Always have. Ever since I first lived here as a little guy, my first memories are actually in Payson. But it's a great community. Like every place, we're not perfect, but the people here, I think, have a big heart and really try. And to prove that, all you have to do is have a tragedy happen in this community, and everybody comes together. And so that's my wife and I believe we bought our last house. Let's see how successful we are at that.
All right.
So.
And one of the blessings that you've had during your time as chief is to find this guy here, who has a lot of talent and is really special and brings a special element to avoiding that tragedy here in Payson. Yeah.
You know, getting the position of fuels manager was I consider a big success as a career, that we moved as a community to having somebody focused on that effort. And then when we recruited for that position, I count myself extremely lucky, and probably one of my best hires I've ever made in my life was to select Kevin. It was we ran through a little process. We evaluated. We did a bunch of background, and after we selected Kevin and he accepted the job, then we've kind of figured out over the last couple of years really what his skill set is, which is much broader than kind of what he portrayed to us when we were interviewing. But Kevin's a great guy. Love having him on the job, and he does a great job for the community.
Yeah. We're all happy to have. See, we might want to build you up a little because you're a humble guy, and I know that because you've been here a couple times already, and you don't like to talk about yourself too much. And he's just, as he shakes his head, But welcome back, Kevin.
Thanks, thank you. It's very kind of for you guys to say those kind words about me. I appreciate it.
You're a good man. You're what you see is what you get, and we like what we see. So how are we doing with the firewizing overall? We know that with the drought, as you heard my prayer this morning, and I've been doing it for a couple of months now, I guess, I think it's the number one concern that really, you talk about the need to bring a community together in a tragedy. Sometimes you need to bring the community together before the tragedy, and we're facing the potential of a tragedy. So we need some divine intervention. We do need moisture in a huge way, but beyond that, there are a lot of things that people in town can do, and people in the surrounding communities can do as well to help with fire prevention and firewizing. So are we making progress? I know we have an ordinance in place now that is been passed by the council. The teeth are going into it pretty soon, as I recall, right? In terms of fines and that sort of thing if somebody is not participating.
August, I believe, correct? Kevin is the moratorium on any enforcement. So Kevin has been working on not just Kevin, it's actually been a departmental effort, but Kevin's been leading the charge on education. I don't know, Kevin, how do you think we're doing as a town?
I think we're doing really well. We're making a lot of progress. Chief and I were talking the other day about, it took decades for us to get to this point, as a town and as a region, really, with the vegetation growth and everything. And it's going to take us a lot of time to overcome that. But we're making progress. We have a lot of really concerned people in the community that are stepping forward and leading, in their own HOAs and their own blocks, and taking initiative to really change things. And that's very encouraging to see, and gives me a lot of inspiration for the future. And I think we're going to make a difference.
But it is kind of controversial in a way because there are some folks here, and I've met some of them, who are not in favor of firewizing. They just, they believe in the independence of their property and property rights, and they want to leave it the way it is, and it's kind of overgrown, but they like it that way. So when you have conversations with those people, how difficult is that?
I think it's a matter of educating people on what it really means, and it's mitigating the risk of living in the forest, basically. And it doesn't mean cutting down all your trees. Of course, the trees are a risk factor, but you mitigate that the best you can. And there are ways to do that and still retain, the sense of living in the forest, but you make it a little safer. And I think once you kind of educate people on what it actually means to protect your property and to reduce the fuel loading, that gets through. And then you can also educate them on the health of that the vegetation. They might have a beautiful ponderosa pine that they just love. Well, they don't realize that the juniper right next to it is taking all the nutrients away from that pine tree, and it's not as healthy as it could be if you thinned out some of that vegetation.
Yeah, I remember one of my neighbors telling me that when I was cleaning out manzanitas and separating them, I didn't take them all out, but I trimmed them up from the ground and took out the ones that had all the gray on them, real pretty dried out trunks and that sort of thing. And he came by and chastised me, and he said, it takes 100 years for one of those manzanitas to grow. And I made up the number. I said, yeah, but it takes about 10 minutes for this thing to just burn your house down. So, I'm going to go in favor of the greater, the lesser evil, or
you might have actually been generous on 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Manzanita burns very quickly and very hot. And, back to your point, I think a lot of people who move here, and we have people who have lived here their entire lives, but there is a large segment of the community that has moved here, and what we see is what we think history has always been. So you look at the forest and you think that's a natural forest, and in reality we know it's not. So the education, I think, is part of that. And then we love our trees. It's part of the reason why we came up here, but I think we're kind of loving our trees to death. And just like Kevin said, if you have a few less trees and you love a few less trees, they'll be way healthier, and not just from wildfire, but as we start working on getting healthier trees, they're more resistant to snowstorms, and other bark beetle, you name it. The reality in my mind is the land will reclaim itself. It thinks it's out of balance, and it will reclaim itself. And we can either do that ourselves, or we can let it do it how it chooses to do it, whether that's wildfire, bark beetle, or any other calamity that the ecosystem brings on itself. So it's really up to us how we want that to happen, but it's going to happen one way or the other.
Yeah, we had plant experts on talking about the drought and the impact of the drought on the bark beetles, the impact of the drought on all the broken limbs that we had during the last snowstorm last winter. And it's incredible because the plants are real dry themselves. They're just not getting the type of moisture that they would normally get, and that creates not only a fire hazard, but as you said, a threat to the plant themselves. So keeping them trimmed up and cleaned up and maximize the nutrition that they can get by thinning the undergrowth and everything that's growing around their roots is an important thing. Got a lot of questions and a lot of places to go with the conversation. I'm sure you guys have some specific topics that you wanted to talk about. Let's go to the phones and see what we've got. Good morning. Welcome to the forum. Who's on the line?
Hi, my name is Susan.
Hi, Susan.
I'm moving away from my radio, so give me a second.
Okay, thank you.
Is this far enough?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I live in a very strong block home. Down, my neighbor next door is a vacation-owned home. He lives down in the valley with his wife. I've been in my home since 2018. I have met him several times asking him to clean up his yard, remove the dead, remove the leaves, whatever. I contacted, at the time there was no Firewise law, but I had a representative come out, and he said, well, I can only observe from the street. I can't go onto his property. So I encountered the man again. I sussed 3 or 4 times over the last 3 years, and I asked him again. I said, sir, please, I have a small dog. Can you at least get rid of the foxtail? Because they will kill my dog. And he huffed away. But eventually he came back with his wife, and he said, tell me what a foxtail looks like. So he brought his daughter over, and they said, well, we'll go look for foxtails. That is that much of a conversation. Didn't do much to his yard. I have paid my landscaper to come down my property line and kill what he can without encroaching on my neighbor's property. But I know the fire marshal person, whoever, can't walk into my neighbor's property line, but he could certainly come down mine, and he can look into that man's backyard for the fire hazard. That is a wood cabin, and I have been I'm a smoker. I've been so tempted to just flick a match in the backyard and stand there with a hose spraying my roof line and just watch it go up, because it is going to catch on fire eventually. They're not here. They leave lights on that could spark.
Susan, I have to tell you, when you said you would flick your cigarette over there, you got a kind of a real strange reaction from the two gentlemen in the studio here.
I mean, I would not do that.
I know you would not.
I'm mobility challenged, so I have to carefully go down my paver set, walk my line with my fence, and I've got some people working on stairs, but that's another issue. But every time I walk that line and I look and I see dead stuff and leaf litter and dead stuff and leaf litter and lights on and who knows what else is back down in there.
Yeah, we got you, Susan. We hear your frustration, and Kevin's going to try to see if he can address it.
Hey, good morning, Susan. Thank you for calling in and asking us about your next door neighbor. And I just got your email this morning, and I will follow up with you on your issues out there.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your call. I know there are a lot of people like that, because you see it. You see, a property that you look at and you say, that's Firewise, and that's Firewise, and that's Firewise, and then you get the next one, it's like, boy, that one's really overgrown, and then the next one is. And so a lot of people have, but a lot of people have not paid attention. And when you get to the absentee owners or the vacation owners of part-time residents, that becomes even more difficult. So in August, Chief, are we gonna see some notices passed out? I mean, do we have properties that we've identified already that say, you really got to clean up your property, but you haven't had a response from the owner?
So our approach has been, since the ordinance passed, and really our approach before was incremental toward trying to improve this. So I think I know probably when this started by her explanation. We had limited ability to do anything. We had to basically, we could stand at the street and look on your property, and we'd write a letter kind of explaining how we saw a threat and what we thought you needed to do. Kevin took that and started doing that on a more full-time basis, because that was his focus. Has been meeting with a lot of people. That's the advantage of having a full-time person, is he meets with a lot of people and talks about it. And so since the ordinance has been passed, what we're doing is it generates a contact, if we can, a phone call or a letter, and then hopefully a personal conversation is what Kevin's goal is with those people. And then some people are less responsive. Would that be the way to say that, Kevin? And those people will get another letter coming up here toward the end of the year moratorium, expressing the fact that just so you know, this is kind of no longer a friendly request. There's a code in town. You have to meet the code. Please contact us immediately. And then ultimately we'll run through the legal process for those that don't want to seek education to use the enforcement piece of that. But I think our goal in the fire service is kind of what they call the 5 E's to keep fire out. And it's engineering, which is the plan review and that portion, the enforcement, the education, the enhancement, which is where we provide, some places provide monetary incentives or incentives to do something. And we do that in the code. If you do certain things for your house, not just this code, but in the code family, to make your building safer, then we give you give backs that you don't have to do certain other things. And then the last one is extinguishment. That's our final key to fire safety, is extinguishment. But we really lean heavily on the education piece, and that's where Kevin was a great pick. He fits right into that mold. But Kevin's also been a police officer in his career and has no issue with pulling the enforcement card out, and we will do that. That is, and I think the one thing I'd like people to understand is the fire code and the fuels management code are not the fire chief's code. They're not the fire department's code. They are the town's code. The council has passed that as a law that says this is how we want the town of Payson to behave. Fire chief, go forth and make this happen. It's no different than you can't park in certain spots, or the speed limit on this road is such. Police chief, go forth and enforce that. It's kind of the same thing. It's not my code. I we get a little bit of leeway because we really like the education part, but the enforcement of it is really we're charged with enforcing it, and we will, and there'll be those issues. One of the things, and I'm not speaking about Susan's house. I don't know anything about Susan's situation other than what she just explained, and Kevin apparently got an email this morning. But one of the things we find when we go out often on these is there's concern about the neighbor's property, and often we look at the complainant and we're like, well, there's a lot you can still do for your place. And living in the forest comes with some responsibilities, and some of those responsibilities are living with the nature that you live in, that you enjoy viewing, and part of that is making sure that you're fire adapted, that your house is resilient to wildfire. So the more you do on your own house, the better off. Even if your neighbor doesn't do something, you're better off yourself. And I think that's something, I'll let Kevin talk more about that if he wants, but that's something we talk about a lot is we have to learn to live with the wildfire risk. In some places the wind blows and your house blows away and the sea rises. Some places the earth shakes. Some places tornadoes. Our natural disaster primary risk is wildfire, and we have to learn to live with that risk. And certainly respect that risk. I would encourage people not to be fearful of that risk. It's absolutely a risk that we face, and we have to adapt to it. And there's tools we can use to adapt, very much like we can build a stronger house to withstand hurricanes or earthquakes. Well, we can build better houses. We can modify the landscape so that we're more resilient to that threat. And that's really, I think, what our big overarching goal is to understand that we have to adapt ourselves to live in this environment. It's not like living in other environments because they're more engineered. Here the engineering is more education, and then of course our stuff grows back, so it takes constant maintenance. So
yeah, I think Kevin, what we appreciate about your previous appearances on the program and the things that you've said is you've tried very hard not to take a heavy-handed approach, so that it's just like, this is it, and and it's kind of get in people's faces. You want to work with them and say, you understand, and the person says, well, I have an economic problem, or I have a physical problem, or I've got a timing problem. I know I need to do it, but I can't do it right now. I was planning to do it later, and that sort of thing, and to just work with people to try to mitigate the threat without having to be heavy-handed. But as we get closer to the end of when we really get into the intensity in July and August, hopefully we'll have a monsoon season this year. That's what we keep praying for. But in August, when it gets really hot, it's going to be take on a different dimension, and that's probably good timing for the enforcement part of the code.
And Chief and I share kind of the same perspective on that. It's better to get somebody to be an advocate and work with you, and better to gain compliance through cooperation than to enforce that. Because it's an ongoing thing. It's not a once you enforce it, you're going to have to come back and convince that property owner to buy into the program, so that years down the road they come back and do it without having to enforce it on them every year, and that's the ultimate goal, is to get people on our side and working with us.
474-2427 if you have a question or a comment this morning for Chief Staub or Fuels Manager Kevin McCauley, give us a call. We look forward to hearing. You're listening to the Wednesday edition of the Rim Country Forum. I'm Charlie Seraphin. Thank you for listening wherever you're listening, whether you're here in Rim Country or anywhere around the world, listening on KMOGcountry.com. And remember to tell your friends and relatives who are not as fortunate as we are to be able to live in the Rim Country that they can listen to the program on a daily basis. KMOGcountry.com online, and we have listeners in Tibet this morning. They don't have a fire danger the way that we do in Tibet, but they do have earthquakes there from time to time, so have all kinds of different things going on. These guys were actually, both of them looked at me like, really? You got listeners in Tibet this morning? Yeah. Why not? So the other part of it, and everybody keeps coming back to, paradise has taken on a new meaning as a word after what happened in California, in Paradise, California. So we hope unlikely, but in the possibility of a catastrophic fire in town, we talked with the police chief, with Ron, about evacuation, and he said, Well, we have a couple of areas that we've identified in town that we think, would be safe havens, at least for a time, for some residents. But don't want to. Everybody kind of knows what they are, but we don't want to identify them. And we have laid out some evacuation routes, which there aren't. I mean, the ways out of town are pretty simple. You can go north, you can go south, or you can go east, and that's it. So everybody knows that. But we haven't really gotten into, if you live in this neighborhood, the street that you're most likely, and understood that the winds may change, but we've kind of kept the whole thing a little bit secretive. And can you help explain it? Because somebody asked me about it. I said, I don't know. I mean, why wouldn't you tell somebody in a neighborhood that you're most likely, but listen for the information, but your most likely route is you're going to go down this street, you're going to take a right, and then you're going to feed in, because that's where we want you to get onto the B line if you're going to get on the B line.
Well, first of all, clearly evacuation is a law enforcement charge in the state of Arizona. So as fire professionals, our goal is to deal with the fire. We'll be in constant communication. There was a council meeting where we discussed this, Kevin and I, and Jeremy Plain and Chief Tischer's sergeant was there. And we discussed each of our roles. So as the fire starts developing, we'll be hand in hand with the law enforcement, and they will be executing the evacuations in the areas we say are at risk. So it's absolutely their charge. I think part of the concern on those who have to execute that order of actually making people evacuate is, so we say go early, and when we mean early, it's probably earlier than most people think early is. If you're leaving just before an evacuation order, you're really not leaving early. So the concern, I think, by those people who have to execute that order is typically, when we're doing that, if we're not ahead of the curve a long ways because the situation doesn't allow us, we have to find a route that allows us to be able to get equipment in at the same time we get people out. And there is this third variable called the wildfire that it's difficult to plan exactly where it is. It's difficult to plan what the wind's doing that day, what the weather's doing. We can think of topography and stuff, I would think, Kevin, wouldn't you? But the wind is really the unknown, that we just don't know what it's doing that day and where exactly the fire is in relationship to the house. So I think the concern for those who have to execute it is people will go on autopilot. They've heard go south and then east. Well, today I don't want you to go south and east. I want you to go north. And that change in plans in people's heads in a crisis situation, people typically don't think clearly, and we tend to react the way that we have self-trained ourselves through thought. So I think that's their big concern. Unless Kevin has something else, that's kind of what I think is the big concern that the law enforcement community shares with that.
And I think a couple points that's important for people to understand is, the law enforcement community is going to react to what the fire command staff is working on, and you can't define that exactly because every fire is going to be different, even if they started in the same place. Depending on, like Chief said, the weather and the winds, they could act totally different. So there's a lot of flexibility built in there, and the command staff of the fire is going to be asking law enforcement to evacuate certain areas and certain routes, like Chief was saying. We have in town a fire adaptive community committee that works for us and helps us with some of these educational issues, and that is one of the issues that we're kind of working on there, and the goal is to get education out there as far as the evacuation routes, and possibly give people some trigger points, benchmarks as far as what to look for as early evacuation points. When should you be thinking about evacuation? I think those kind of educational points we need to do a better job of getting out to people, and we are working on that.
Good morning. Welcome to the forum. Who's on the line?
This is Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
I had called a while back. We were talking about fire-wise and evacuation basically out of the Houston Mesa Road. And I haven't had a chance to get a hold of anybody. I guess I need to talk to the county seat, the district county supervisor. But in the meantime, if we have to be evacuated, how does that work? Because there's a lot of people that lives off that control road. And what if the fire is up in that area? We only have those two ways out, and that's Houston Mesa Road and then Control Road.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. I appreciate your call, and I'm going to update these guys, too, on what you said last time, which I thought was really important. But, Chief, do you have an idea?
Well, you know, we have communities all over Rim Country that have limited ways in and out, and we in the fire service and we in the emergency services and even the county have identified them as issues. We have some of those communities that come off the control road have one way in, one way out. We as responders have faced that issue, and the people who live in those communities have faced that issue since before the Dude Fire. The Dude Fire spotlighted some of these. So actually, the people who would be doing the evacuation in those areas is the Sheriff's Department, Gila County Sheriff's Department. Now, all of our law enforcement community does a great job of working together. So I know on the previous fires, we've had our local Payson police officers up there, Globe officers, Fish and Game, DPS, and Sheriff's Department affecting evacuations. And unfortunately, we've had enough incidents and fires up in that area that our Sheriff's Department's they've had a chance to execute and practice and exercise those evacuation issues quite regularly. And Ginny is not wrong about some of those issues. I guess the thing I would say is you'd actually be surprised at how well our Sheriff's Department executes those evacuations. They really do a great job, given the limited ability. And she's absolutely right. There's two ways. If you're on Houston Mesa Road, you can go north and south. And if you go north, then you have east or west. Those are your two options. If you're on Control Road, you can go east or west. It's pretty much your options. But the Sheriff's Department has had an opportunity to execute those evacuations several times. The last time I can think of we did that in any large scale was the Highline Fire. We evacuated several communities along the Control Road, and they did that very, very effectively and very efficiently. So it's that would be who she needs to speak to. She could certainly speak to her county supervisor, but it's the county sheriff does that, and Sheriff Shepard's crew does a great job at that, and they've had an opportunity to exercise that a few times. Yeah, so Jenny, one of the things, and she talked to Chief Tischer when he was here visiting with us last time on the evacuation protocol. One of the things that she pointed out is there are a lot of people with mobility issues in the community, and there are a lot of neighborhoods like that where there are people who have who struggle to get around. And it's what the chief pointed out is it's really critical for those neighborhoods to come together, identify the people who they know are going to need help, and create a plan that not only involves getting their stuff and getting their animals and getting out themselves, but taking care of the other folks in the community who are going to need their help. And that doesn't happen on the day that when the alarm sounds and we've got a wildfire burning. That's got to happen ahead of time. The other thing that we talked about is a personal preparation of your important documents or any photos or the critical things that you have. If you're in a panic, if a police officer knocks on your door and says you have to evacuate immediately, it's too late to be able to think clearly and do all those things. So preparation is the key. And we talked about it before, but there's still people listening who haven't done what we've told them that they need to do.
Arizona is one of the leading edge states actually that have adopted Ready, Set, Go as a model for evacuations. And a lot of people don't understand that Ready, Set, Go isn't just points in an evacuation. There's actually a whole program behind that gives you checklists for each different component of that, and the ready, basically ready. Everybody's supposed to be ready all the time, and that's getting your property fuel mitigated on your property, making sure your house is ready to withstand wildfire, knowing your evacuation routes, and if there's great literature out there. In fact, just this year we had some custom literature designed for us by the International Fire Chiefs Association that has those checklists in there. If anybody wants that, we try and get that out as much as we possibly can, and that's one of the educational components that we work on. So it works, but like you said, there's a lot more to it than and people need to be ready for it. So the idea is not to be panicked and running around at the last second when you're told to evacuate by a law enforcement officer. We want to avoid that.
Yeah. It's probably too late. Well, I talked to somebody yesterday, and they said when they hear the ready, when the fire department in conjunction with the police department puts out the ready alert, they said, I'm going. That's it. When you say ready, I'm gone, because I may spend a little bit of gas, and I may end up someplace for the night where I didn't really especially want it to be, but it's a lot. Your odds are better, and if a significant portion of the community took that attitude, then you would have less panic if you get to go.
So the only caution I would give you is we should always be ready. We live in a fire-adapted ecosystem. Fires can happen any day. Therefore, if you live here, you should always be ready. Now, certainly, when it occurs and we start talking about it, that's probably a good thing. But I would say myself, I know Kevin can offer up his opinion, but set is kind of where I've set for my family. When we go into set, we have everything done. Just go before the evacuation order actually happens. But I appreciate the sentiment that I'm going to go early and everything. But I guess I would reiterate that we should always be ready. So I don't know when you're going to go, because that's something we should live every day as a set of ready.
I agree, and I think that's an important point that people need to understand. And that literature that I was talking about kind of defines that a little better. There's a lot to it, and like I said, there's checklists in there that can help people be at each one of those stages, when they get to it, ready and set and go. But like Chief said, we should always be ready. When you get to set, that's when your ears need to perk up, and you need to make sure everything's in order, and make sure your family and friends know your plan, and like I said, there's a lot more to it.
We have a lot of people who listen to the radio station, obviously, and when those orders come down, the radio station will go into emergency mode, and we'll be able to communicate some of that. But we talked about, I guess there's an app for your phone, but a significant portion of the community, and I'm sure this is not a shock to either one of you, don't use apps. There are a lot of people who don't have computers. There are a lot of people who don't, if they have a phone, they may have a flip phone. They may not even have a smartphone. So to rely on urban technology, the highest level of urban technology, to get the message out here is not going to work. And we don't have a warning system right now.
Well, let's talk about that real quick. Because the system you're talking about, I think, is Everbridge. So Everbridge is an app, but it's also something you can register for with no technology at all, and put a phone number down, and we will send you a phone call. So we talk about the high technology because it instantly comes to my cell phone. But the reality is that system really takes care of anybody who has some sort of technology. So we could have them hand fill out a form. We can enter it into the system for them. And I say we as the responding community. That's managed by the emergency management of Gila County. And as long as you have a phone number, we can reach you. So it's everybody goes, it's technology, I don't want it. You're right, but it's also about as simple as you can get. It works basically identically to reverse 911. We can geofence an area, and every phone number, app, and email, if you have an app on your phone, will alert in that geofenced area. So that's what makes it really powerful for us.
So you don't even have to register for it.
You have to register for it.
You have to register.
Because we don't know, due to some laws, we don't have the ability to just call everybody who has a phone number. And then the other challenge with that we're finding out is not everybody who has a phone number. Not everybody has a phone number anymore that works off the reverse 911 system. So there's a lot of technology is changing things, and this system can be as simple as filling out a form and having a phone number. or it can be as elaborate as you can have an app on your phone that will alert you. So it goes all the way from our millennials to our greatest generation can pretty much make this system happen. So those who are saying that to you are kind of shortchanging the system because they're not understanding the simplicity of it at the same time.
But you have to be proactive and you have to register with the county.
You do have to register for it. And the other part of that, too, is you go back to those mobility issues. You can voluntarily put in there mobility issues or special needs. And I'm telling the government my secrets. I get that. The reality is there's no agency in Gila County that has enough people to go looking at your secrets unless we need to. But it is information that can be used by fire commanders or the law enforcement during evacuation to highlight those needs. So if we have a community with a high need of special needs, that's going to change the evacuation. It might change our fire issues, how soon we pull the trigger on evacuating a community. But that system certainly is very high tech. It's also about as simple as you can get on the other end too. Is we can take a form, we can have somebody enter it, but certainly if you have a computer connection, you can go to the library and enter that information. It is not terribly techy, and you can get some basic information. All you have to have is a phone number. That'd be a flip phone, a voice over internet provider phone number, an old copper hardwired CenturyLink phone. Any of those will work. So it is a very robust system, and what happens is everybody goes, well, it's too techy for me.
Okay.
That may be. We can help you with that.
So the Everbridge system, if you don't have a computer but you have a telephone, you can call the county and have a chat with them. Call the county, ask for the Department of Emergency Services, and tell them that you want to be part of the Everbridge system, and they'll direct you from there.
They'll help you get it done.
They'll help you get it done.
Yeah. I hear that a lot, and I'm like, I think people are missing the simplicity too because they're worried about the techie side of it.
Well, it's a communication thing, and it really we've been doing this program now for quite a while, almost a year, and no one's really explained that before. It was always an app. There's a great app because that's what a lot of people go to and want to talk about it. But it's the technology is better and simpler than I thought it was, so that's great. Good morning. Welcome to the forum. Who's on the line?
Good morning. This is Sue.
Hi, Sue.
In other states I've been in, they have the Nixle system, so you just punch in 888-777 into your phone, flip phone as well, and you get all kinds of alerts besides fire, accidents, when they open and close roads. We don't have that in Arizona. Does anybody know?
So Nixle and Everbridge do the same exact thing. They're just two competing companies, and I believe what happened is we got money from someone for Gila County to go with Everbridge, but it works exactly the same way. But for all intents and purposes, they're mirror systems of each other. Ours is just Everbridge instead of Nixle. We used to push Nixle because we did it voluntarily here in the town, but then the county got the Everbridge system, and their level of Everbridge was much better than our level of Nixle. So it's essentially does the same thing for you.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for your call, Sue. 10 minutes until 10 o'clock. You're listening to the Rim Country Forum here on KMOG in Payson. I'm Charlie Seraphin, along with Chief David Staub and Kevin McCulley, the fuels manager for Payson. We'll be back to talk more fire after this. Good morning. Thank you so much for listening to the Rim Country Forum. Charlie Seraphin with you, and we are talking about fire preparedness and readiness this morning with the fuels manager Kevin McCauley and Payson Fire Chief David Staub. Just one last thing. We'll put a punctuation mark on this, but my impression was, falsely, that the Everbridge system was a high-tech app. That's the way it was described to me. But what you've shared here is that it's really it has a low-tech component too. So you don't have to be real high-tech in order to take advantage of it. But you do have to register, and you can do that at a county office. I assume you could probably go into the county office here in Payson and tell them. We could send them down there. What's the worst they can do? They can call emergency management and say, send somebody up here to help fill out these forms. But pick up the phone, call the county, especially if you don't have a computer and you're not online, and ask them what you need to do. And hopefully they'll direct you and get your information in there. And especially if you have mobility issues, tell them that you have mobility issues. And Kevin, you said earlier, the lady Jenny who called in said that was something she wanted to do, and on Houston Mesa Road there that she felt was important, is because they know they have people with mobility issues, but they've never come together as a community to talk about it. You said there is a community here in town that's doing that now.
Yeah, there's several HOAs off of East Phoenix Street, and I know there's other ones in town also, but I just had contact with them yesterday, and they are getting together as a community, as their little blocks and HOAs, and identifying people that need help, so that if there's an evacuation notice, the leaders of those communities will know, hey, we need have some people over here that need help, and they can get them that help, and I think that's a really great way to do it, because the police department is the overall Payson thing, and they're going to get around to everybody's house also. But if you have those communities that can focus that and are really in touch with their community members, that's a very valuable tool.
That's one of the benefits of living in a small town. And I've mentioned this on the air a lot of times, that I've lived in a lot of major cities all over the country, but I grew up in a small town. And I remember as a teenager, my mother saying, be sure to go down and check on so-and-so and so-and-so, because we had winter storms with, high drifts and whatnot. And the concern there was that people would freeze to death because their pilot would go out on the heater overnight and they'd be trapped in their house because you couldn't get in. But as kids, we would trudge through, get up to the front door, knock on the door, and make sure Grandma and Grandpa, whoever lived there, was okay, and then head off to school. And that was a part of the routine, but it's something you can't do in a lot of metropolitan areas, but you can do it in a small town. You can go and meet your neighbors and knock on the door and ask them if everything's okay and if they're going to need any help, and have they registered for Everbridge, right? And start the movement and make our community that much safer for life and limb, which is, why don't you talk about the priorities, either of you, when you have a wildfire? What's number one, what's number two, what's number three?
Well, I guess number one would be just, controlling the fire, right? And that's where most all the fire suppression resources are going to be concentrating on. And, that's why there's a separation there between us and the police department, because we have to address the fire and control that. That's our number one priority.
It was kind of a leading question, because I was going to say, if let's say it breaks out in 2 or 3 different places, you have limited resources. You don't have all the fire engines that or personnel that you'd like to have to be able to do it. So how do you pick where you're going to send the people? I assume number one is human life, that you're going to protect the lives of the people first, and then the second one is going to be property, and then the third one is just wherever it is, if the fire is burning.
We tend to be a very simple group, Charlie.
Okay,
so
good.
We've kind of applied the same 3 priorities to everything. Our number one priority actually above is life safety, but we divide that into 2 categories. We look at responder safety and then public safety. And don't mean that in a negative way. We take a very fine line there, but the simple reality is we have to keep our responders safe to help people. And number 2 then is property conservation. Number 3 is incident stabilization, getting us back to where a normal level can happen. And we apply that to any incident, from a medical call to a catastrophic wildfire. We use those same principles. And but Kevin is not wrong. In a wildfire approach, our number one priority is trying to control that fire, because that mitigates the other 3 the best we can. In the Paradise incident, if you actually dive into it, they had to go away from fire control, and they had to do everything for life safety because of events that transpired. But yeah, we prioritize human life, and the best way we can do that, as Kevin's absolutely right, is we try to get after that fire as quickly as possible and get it controlled. But as far as where we make those decisions, there's a human being who is the incident commander, who has to take in all the information that is imperfect at that moment and try to come up with a perfect solution. And the way we're successful at that is called reevaluation. But he or she is going to take in all the information they can get and try to make the best decision they can at that moment to protect the most amount of human lives and the most amount of property.
Is that going to depend who's on that day and what time of day it is, and also that sort of thing? I mean, is there a large number of people who might be the incident commander?
So yeah, we have there's 13 fire officers and 2 staff officers in the fire department between all of our company officers and battalion chiefs. Our battalion, whoever the battalion chief that day is going to make that decision. But they take vacations too, and we have captains that act up for them. It could be the first in company officer. That individual gets a lot of responsibility in making life and death decisions, and they know that, and they take that role very seriously. But as far as the general approach, I think the one thing we have, and I'll let Kevin speak to this if he wants, but I'd like to think that we have a pretty focused view on how we see things in the fire department, and all of those officers are going to respond in a fairly consistent manner because we've trained that way, and they're going to do the best they can. But yeah, don't let it pass you up. It's a human being, and we deal with a lot of imperfect information trying to make a perfect solution, and it's not perfect, and we know that. So we try to set up ways to correct that by creating teams. Kevin mentioned a command team. That's what we're going to set up. But Kevin, I think all of us kind of look at this similarly. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. And one of the points that goes along with that is the incident commander has a lot of training to be in that spot. It's not just anybody that takes over that control or makes those decisions. And as the fire gets bigger, that those decisions transfer to a more experienced team, basically. And there's level 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in command, the command structure. And by the time you get to the number 1, those are the most trained people in the United States, or in the Southwest in our case, that are driving the decisions behind that fire. So,
well, we hope it doesn't happen, but we have to do everything we can to make sure that it doesn't happen, and everybody plays a role. So if you are a resident here, whether you own or you rent, if you live in Rim Country, you've got a responsibility, and we're counting on you to do your part. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate what you do every day, and especially as we're in this fire season. I want to thank our sponsors, too: Sunshine Cleaning and Restoration, the Owens Law Firm, Realty Executives Arizona Territory, Pinnacle Propane, Banner Health Payson Medical Center, the Dana Law Group, and the Power of Fives. We'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early at 9 o'clock, when we host the Payson Unified School District tomorrow, and we learn all about what's going on at the schools. You're listening to KMOG Payson. It's a little bit after 10 o'clock. 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 A little bit after 10 o'clock.